What do an ancient Celtic chant, a murderous Italian composer, and a millionaire pharmacist all have in common? Lizzo. Welcome to The Influencers. I'm Lisa Robbin Young. I love music, and I love knowing the stories behind the artists that shape our lives. And now I get to share those stories with you. With the help of music historians, educators, journalists, and fans, we'll trace back hundreds of years to find the earliest influences that helped make American rapper, singer, and flautist Lizzo who she is today. Some will be obvious, but who else will we find along the way? Hop into the musical Wayback Machine with me as we create a mixtape for the ages. Together, we'll climb Lizzo's musical family tree and find out who influences the influencers. One of the things I most appreciate about Lizzo isn't her musicality. It's her demonstrated concern for inclusion, self-acceptance, and body positivity. In 2014, Lizzo participated in the ongoing What's Underneath project from Style Like You, a media company focused on self-acceptance. In the project, guests sit on a stool and talk about their relationship to their body as they remove their clothing until there's nothing left. Not sure I'd have the courage to do something like that myself. Her experience in the project inspired the song My Skin from her second studio album, Big Girl, Small World. That 2015 album was her second release. Lizzo released it on her own label, not something you see many people doing that early in their career. But that bet paid off. Lizzo signed to American producer Ricky Reed's Nice Life recording company and a deal with Atlantic Records to produce her first major label EP, Coconut Oil. Together, Reed and Lizzo penned what would become the first single from Coconut Oil, Good as Hell. Good as Hell was originally recorded and released as part of the soundtrack to the Ice Cube comedy Barbershop 3: The Next Cut. The first music video for the song was tied much more closely to that theme. But the re-release of the song elicited a new video starring the marching band of the HBCU Southern University with Lizzo donning a marching band uniform and taking the field with piccolo in hand. Good as Hell didn't chart or get much traction after the release of Coconut Oil in 2016. But it became a sleeper hit, riding on the coattails of another sleeper hit, Truth Hurts, in 2019. That song gained in popularity thanks to being featured in the Netflix film Someone Great, and a surge in popularity of the track on the social media app TikTok. Both tunes ended up being re-released as singles in 2019 and were ultimately added as bonus tracks on Lizzo's third album, 'Cause I Love You, Lizzo's first full-length album with major label Atlantic Records. Billboard magazine counts Good as Hell as one of the 10 best Lizzo tracks because of its catchy tune and its uplifting lyrics. Since then, Reed and Lizzo have collaborated on several albums, winning Grammys for 'Cause I Love You and About Damn Time, which we'll hear more about in just a bit. For now, let's begin with Lizzo's rap influences. It's about damn time. Turn up the music. That's Lizzo's About Damn Time, and if you're listening closely, you can hear that the piano part was built on the 1984 rap tune Hey DJ by the world's famous Supreme Team. It's a little slower in the original, so I'm going to speed it up a bit. Can you hear it? This hip-hop duo rose to fame with a little help from punk icon Malcolm McLaren, the same guy who inspired Eminem's Slim Shady to sing "Two trailer park girls go round the outside, round the outside, round the outside" in his song Without Me. In a 2015 interview for NME.com, Lizzo talked about two of her earliest influences, skipping school to see Destiny's Child at a local mall, which we'll talk about later, and how Crime Mob, specifically the rap solo by 17-year-old Diamond, changed everything for her. She said, quote, "I know I was especially influenced from Crime Mob, and they had this song called Knuck If You Buck, and Diamond came in like, I come in the club shaking my dreads, throwing these bows and busting these heads." And I remember that being such a big deal to me because there was Missy and there were all these people. But this girl was just coming in double-time rap hard on a track with all these other guys. And I just remember going, I want to rap like that. End quote. Crime Mob was big on the Southern hip-hop scene in the mid-2000s, but it disbanded by 2007. Diamond, the youngest member of the group, continues to work as a solo artist in the field, collaborating with Ludacris and Waka Flocka, among others. One of Diamond's biggest influences? Queen Latifah, who is also one of Lizzo's first-line influences. Latifah is a multi-hyphenate artist with film and television credits on top of all her awards as a rap artist. Her early single, Ladies First, featuring then-newcomer Moni Love, became an anthem for a new wave of female rappers, including Diamond.
Queen Latifah came along and she was part of the Native Tongues group.
That's Dr. Kyle Adams, a music professor at Indiana University. He spent decades researching hip-hop history, and I sat down with him to learn more and explore Lizzo's family tree.
It was this collective of hip-hop artists from New York, and they dedicated themselves to kind of positivity, Afrocentric hip-hop, people who were interested in African history and kind of like in uplifting their communities. And so Queen Latifah was a part of that. And so her song "Ladies First," the first big song that I know by her, is all about, powerful women throughout African history.
Ladies First credits several songwriters, including Mark the 45 King James, who created samples for several artists like Jay-Z's Hard Knocks Life ghetto anthem and Eminem's Stan, another Eminem connection. What surprised me, though, was Queen Latifah's unexpected connection to another artist, Billy Joel. I had to do a double take when I saw it. Ladies First also credits Shane the Dr. Faber. He helped engineer many tunes during the golden age of hip-hop and cites Billy Joel as one of his musical influences.
Look at Billy Joel, New York State of Mind. That's got classic jazz changes in it. When you say jazz, it's a loaded word, like hip-hop used to be. Jazz has a reputation of being very sophisticated, and most regular folks aren't really drawn to bebop or anything close to that.
You can watch more of my interview with Shane and hear more about the golden age of hip-hop on our website. For Lizzo, representation matters. Size, shape, sexuality. Lizzo points to bounce music, specifically New Orleans bounce, and the queen of bounce, Big Freedia, as a key influence and musical inspiration. Born Freddie Ross Jr. in New Orleans, Big Freedia sees himself as non-binary, saying, quote, "If I'd known the queen and queen diva would have caused so much confusion, I might have called myself the king. Whatever makes my fans comfortable to be able to call me he or she, I'll allow." Here's the queen of bounce featuring Lizzo on the song Karaoke. Big Freedia points to several of the same influences Lizzo, like Prince. But Big Freedia and Prince both point to 70s disco star Sylvester as an early artist of influence for both music and style. As an openly gay man who was dubbed the Queen of Disco, Sylvester's high falsetto and androgynous style paved the way for people like Prince, Big Freedia, and the queer artists and culture of today, an era where trans culture is both co-opted and erased in most of mainstream pop music. But it's Sylvester's early work that's of note here, inspired by the jazz singers of the early 20th century, namely Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald. Here is Sylvester from his posthumous album of private recordings with Stormy Weather.
Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather.
Written in 1933 by Harold Arlen and Ted Koehler, the original handwritten lyrics to Stormy Weather were once featured on an episode of Antiques Roadshow. We've been looking at Lizzo's musical influences on the rap side of things. Now it's time to shift gears and look at Lizzo, the singer. Earlier, I mentioned an interview where Lizzo confessed to skipping school to hear Destiny's Child.
When I was in the 5th grade, I skipped school to see Destiny's Child perform. I remember they sang this thing that they always used to do called the gospel medley, and I remember it gave me goosebumps, and that was one of the moments I was like, let's go, I want to make music.
The gospel medley is made up of several songs, but there are 2 clips of that song that I want to call out. Here's the first.
Lord, you've been so good. You've been so good to me. I'm so grateful for my blessings, giving you all the praise.
The words are Beyoncé's, but it's gospel music pioneer Kirk Franklin's music that lays the foundation of those tight harmonies. Kirk Franklin took gospel music to a new, younger audience by inviting the popular rhythms of hip-hop to the church. He took a lot of flack, but his legacy is clear. The song Stomp, featuring Salt and Peppa fame, Cheryl James, won the Grammy for Urban Song of the Year in 1998. As we climb this branch of Lizzo's musical tree, we learn that Kirk Franklin's first song was a reimagining of Elton John's Benny and the Jets. Elton John's found in the family trees of many contemporary artists, so it was fun to see him springing up in the tree of a gospel artist. Elton John is connected to both Bach and the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, who's no relation to Kirk. Lizzo made a tweet claiming to be Aretha Franklin for the 2018 generation as she dropped her single Boys. Dr. Adams and I talked about how that might be true.
Talk about Cher and Aretha, like those two. I'd love to hear your comparative ideas and insights on that.
I've never seen Aretha Franklin perform live. I've only seen videos of me. I see her as being the like she and Lizzo share the ethnicity, and just the sort of like the stage presence that the two of them have is amazing. And I think Cher is the same way insofar as Cher is, like when we saw Cher in concert, she very much just sort of strides out into the middle of stage in a huge costume and big sets. I mean, she's very much an operatic performer, Cher is. And I see Lizzo as kind of a combination of those two, because she does, she comes out and she is who she is.
Hey boy, what you say, boy? You trying to play coy like a game boy?
Now, we've still got that second clip from Gospel Medley to cover, the Amen section at the end.
Amen, 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 amen,
This was lifted squarely from another gospel artist, Richard Smallwood, and the end of his song, Total Praise. Again, it's a little slower, but you can clearly hear it. Smallwood studied with Dr. Thomas H. Kerr, Jr., who was the chair of piano at Howard University for over 30 years. He was also the first person of color to give a recital at the National Gallery of Art. His father, Dr. Kerr, Sr., was as much an accomplished performer as his son, but he didn't start that way. His family moved to Baltimore in 1902, and he worked as a domestic for white families, making about $5 a month. By age 15, he learned violin, piano, and flute, and was the concertmaster for the Baltimore City Colored Orchestra not long after getting to high school, and made a whopping $10 per show. Didn't take much time before he formed his own group, the Kerr Society Orchestra. In a 1978 article from the Baltimore Sun, he was 90 at the time, he's quoted as saying, "No jazz. I never did like that jumpy kind of stuff. I like society kind of music, not the kind the riffraff would enjoy." But the up-and-down nature of performing was not to his tastes. He wanted to be society, not play for them. His orchestra helped pay for his tuition to Howard University, one of the nation's historically black universities, where he studied to become a pharmacist. For the community around Dr. Kerr Sr., it was more than a pharmacy. According to his daughter, quote, "Dad was everybody's free doc. He took care of their sicknesses, listened to their troubles, helped the kids with their homework and the soldiers with their allotment applications. He held their money for them, told them stories, wrote their letters, arbitrated their arguments, and gave them free notary service," end quote. Dr. Kerr compounded his own medicines and was quite a successful businessman. He soon began buying up homes in the neighborhood to provide affordable rental housing to his neighbors. He was known to be a wealthy man, easily a millionaire, though he wasn't one to brag on his riches. In my research, I found this quote, which really seems to sum up his philosophy on life and work. Quote, "Being seen's not what's important. It's being somebody. Don't just act like you're something, be something. If you're something, people will see that you're something. But if all you're doing is acting, they'll see that too. You aren't fooling anybody." End quote. Dr. Kerr Sr. died at age 97. Dr. Kerr Jr. died a little more than 3 years later in a car accident. He studied briefly at Howard before transferring to Eastman School of Music to study with Swiss-American pianist Cecile Genhardt, who was responsible for introducing Brahms' Piano Concerto No. 2 to America. At the time of his death, Dr. Kerr Jr. had composed more than 100 pieces, including works for piano, voice, organ, choir, and chamber ensembles. He'd even begun composing an opera that was never completed about the life of Frederick Douglass. Prince was another major influence for Lizzo. Prince put her on a track with his backing band, Third Eye Girl, and kept close watch on her early career. It was his invitation to visit Paisley Park and his solo piano performance of Purple Rain that moved Lizzo to tears. After his death, Lizzo made a commitment in honor of Prince to keep her music focused on positivity. Though her professional career began as a rapper, Lizzo the flautist precedes everything else. Taking up flute at 10 while she was growing up in Houston, she counts Irish flutist Sir James Galway, a.k.a. the man with the golden flute, as one of her heroes. Now, Galway says flutist, Lizzo says flautist, and there's a pretty heated debate about this in the music world. So I created a video to further stir the pot. You can watch that on our website. But to settle things for this episode, Lizzo herself, in a 2022 interview for NPR's Fresh Air, said this, quote, "I always say flautist, and then one day someone's like, it's flutist, and I'm like, shut up." So, for today, flautist it is. Now, unless you're familiar with flute repertoire, you probably don't know the names I'm about to throw at you. Galway studied flute with Marcel Moise, who was taught by Paul Taffanel. He's considered by most to be the founder of the French flute school, an approach to playing flute that emphasized a light tone and a vibrato, very much the same way that Taffanel himself played. It also saw flutists moving away from wooden instruments and towards the metal flutes that are more like what we see in performances today. I learned a lot about the evolution of the flute during my research. You can also watch that video on our website. But what did this style of flute playing sound like? Here's a clip from a French recording in 1928 of Moise playing Andante Pastorelle, a piece written by Taffanel. The French flute school also reintroduced the work of Johann Sebastian Bach, which had apparently been collecting dust in the French libraries of the 19th century, even while his music was enjoying a renaissance across other parts of Europe. But why? What was it about Bach that warranted Taffanel's interest in resurrecting his music for flute? I spoke with Dr. Daniel R. Melamed, a recently retired member of the musicology department at the IU Jacobs School of Music. His research specialty is in the music of Bach.
One of the things Bach was really good at was taking musical ideas and kinds of pieces from various national traditions, for example, and finding ways to get deeper into their musical possibilities.
Dr. Melamed helped me climb out on Bach's branch a bit, where I found two interesting connections. The first to the Prince of Polyphony, Palestrina.
Bach, in fact, did take a particular interest in older musical styles, and in fact, the 16th century multi-voice polyphonic musical style represented most prominently by Palestrina. We've got some musical sources either in his hand or that we know he owned of works by Palestrina. I've written about his likely exposure to a whole bunch of music by Palestrina when he worked at the court of Weimar, and that may have been their source of copies of that music.
Palestrina and madrigal seem to go hand in hand. One account I found said he wrote 140 madrigals. That style of music came out of an earlier style called the frottalla, and one of the most well-known composers of the frottalla was a guy from the Italian Renaissance of the early 1500s, Bartolomeo Trombacino. Not only a rock star on the frottalla scene, but also repeatedly on the wrong side of the law, having to flee the city of Mantua at one point for murdering his wife, of all things. Yet somehow he was welcomed back to write more music for the aristocracy. Oh, the privilege. Here's one of Tromboncino's Frodola, Se ben or non scopra el foco, performed by Dame Emma Kirkby. Now, I said there were two branches in Bach's tree. The second traces back through Telemann.
In a way, the best comparison is Bach's contemporary Georg Philipp Telemann, whom Bach knew quite well. Telemann served, for example, as godfather to his second oldest son, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. That's where he got the name. And the best biography of Telemann is called Music for a Mixed Taste. And the mixed taste was, at the time, understood to be an appreciation of French style and Italian style and so-called Polish style. And it's debatable whether there was something that could be defined as a German style.
Telemann incorporated 16th century Lutheran chorale tunes and hymn stanzas into his 18th century church music. Martin Luther was a bit of a composer and arranger himself, having used Gregorian chants to build off for some of his music. You know, Pie Jesu Domine, dona eis requiem. Okay, maybe not that particular chant, but you get the idea. You'd think that as old as it is, there'd be less controversy around Gregorian chant. And this is where we need to talk about influence in a different way. My research pointed to a number of origins for chant, and Rome's effort to eliminate other influences and set new standards. Kind of typical from what I've seen of the Holy Roman Empire, subsuming or supplanting whatever came before it. In the case of chant, there appears to be three types of plain chant that were mostly wiped out when Gregorian chant became the standard. I can only find one example, derived from a Celtic chant that dates back to the 9th century and is possibly even older than that. It's called Ibut Sancti. We've covered about 1,200 years of musical history to get to Lizzo today. As I said at the beginning, we've only scratched the surface. To unpack more of Lizzo's musical family tree, including our references, extended interviews, and show playlist, point your browser to wfiu.org/theinfluencers. I'm Lisa Robbin Young, reminding you that you never know what kind of an impact you make on the world around you. Who influences you?